Sure. You guys can see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. Well, if I think some of you know me, but anyway, I'm Ben Bakelaar, digital architect working on both the St. Louis University project Metascripta, Vatican Film Library, and the Thomas Edison papers at Rutgers University, where we are using Omeka S because there is no institutional infrastructure to support a IIIF implementation. And the library systems that are available to these projects are not, they're kind of old, right? So Omeka was the natural choice for a single collection. The Edison papers is about 250,000 images, soon to be 500,000. And actually the Metascripta project is the same. We're heading towards 500,000 images there as well. So I'm not sure if I should be introducing more about my project or about Omeka, but I would prefer to maybe talk about Omeka itself, because anyone can click around an Omeka site and see how it works, but I'd rather talk about the intersection, right, of IIIF and Omeka. So I'm just gonna go ahead and do that until somebody tells me otherwise. So let's hop over to the Omeka site. For those of you who I'm going to assume are not totally familiar with the Omeka software, when you go to their website and you have to choose, right? So just really quick, Omeka Classic is the older version, Omeka S is the new version. They're both actively maintained, but I'm only using Omeka S, so I'm not going to talk about IIIF in relation to Omeka Classic, only in terms of Omeka S. The key thing that enables IIIF inside Omeka is not built in out of the box, it's the modules. So let me go ahead and kind of minimize my videos here. And in particular, there's several modules. I think I reviewed these at the lightning talk last December, the midwinter meeting. So IIIF server is here. And actually all of these modules are maintained by the same person, Daniel Berthereau over in France. IIIF server at this point handles the manifest generation. So if you have an item in Omeka, a metadata record with associated images, this is what will generate the manifest. I haven't done anything with audio and video, so I'm just only familiar with images. It's not too hard to configure. It kind of works mostly out of the box. And it works in conjunction with Image Server, which handles the image tiling on the fly, on-demand image tiling. And I believe it's using IIP Image Server behind the scenes. Since Omeka is a LAMP package, Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP, IIP, right, is the software that kind of integrates with that. So this is great, right? You can install Omeka out of the box, totally free. You can download these two modules totally free, and you can actually enable IIIF on your Omeka site. And with Omeka S, you can really handle quite a large collection, hundreds of thousands of images. It may not be quite institutional level in terms of being able to handle millions, but yeah, for a single collection or maybe a small library or something like that, it seems to me like the conversations I have, lots of smaller units are looking into Omeka. So you get your manifests and you get your images, then you need a viewer. And I think here, for some reason on the official, quote unquote, official list of modules, only Universal Viewer is linked, but there's also Mirador. So if you were to go to Daniel's GitHub or GitLab account, and I have trouble navigating GitLab, so I'm just gonna go to his GitHub. he has many, many repositories for Omeka, but if you were to type in Mirador, you would find a Mirador viewer. Right? And so right out of the box, you have your manifest, your image generation, and your viewers, two options for your viewers inside Omeka S. So I'll give you a quick example or demonstration of how that works for us. And I'll introduce one problem that's still out there before passing it on to the next presenter or answering questions or whatever. So if we pick an item here, the way we have it set up, we built our theme to display the IIIF badge and to display this button. But this button takes you to kind of an automatically generated page within Omeka, which pulls in the manifest and pulls in the images and runs it. And in this case, in Mirador 2.7, it supports Mirador 3.0 as well. And I've been working on a recipe and kind of a demonstration to get people really going with an out-of-the-box IIIF implementation. So feel free to message me on Slack if you're interested in that. It's very close, I think, the recipe to being kind of one-click install, sort of plug and play. The problem is that I find is that the images that you may want to load into your Omeka site may be really high quality. They may be like 20 megabyte TIFFs. You're not going to upload 20 megabyte TIFFs, 100,000 of them into Omeka. The image processing stuff that's built into Omeka is just way too slow for that because it generates derivative images and all this stuff. So often what you have to do is go outside of Omeka to host your images in a IIIF compliant image server. And at that point, you can no longer use the manifest generation capabilities, at least not easily, that I've found. There's no way to point the manifest generator to say, here's my images over here outside of Omeka. So it kind of expects everything to be inside of Omeka. Once you break out of Omeka, you're hosting your own image server and you're generating your own manifests, and you're just using Omeka as a display, discovery layer. So that, depending on the needs and requirements of your collection and the size of it, I think that's maybe the primary issue that people hit when they're trying to take advantage of the simplicity of Omeka, and then they run into that issue. So that's really, really quick. I mean, I'm not sure if I started too detailed or not detailed enough, but does anyone have a question or a comment on something else you'd like me to show? Trying to monitor the chat here. Oh, here we go. Sorry, there's something in chat.
It looks like there was one question about if Omeka S is using Mirador 3 or if it was still on 2.
Oh yeah, you're right. So it does support Mirador's, the Mirador module for Omeka supports both 2.7 and 3. Regis, thank you for the clarification. So I guess Daniel implemented his own thing, maybe based on IIP image or something like that. I have not found any issues with, I'm not sure if I ever tried to display the universal viewer and Mirador viewer on the same page, but there's a way around that. So that's what we did. Instead of displaying the Mirador viewer in the item page, we just provide a link to it. And this link it's what's called a route in Omeka, but it's automatically generated. So in theory, there would be a different route for universal viewer, and then you could just have your theme buttons link out to the relevant route for that item, giving it the right identifiers and all of that stuff. So yeah, you could run multiple viewers. And in fact, I think Daniel even has another viewer somewhere on here I can't remember. He's got 209 repositories. So it's, oh yeah, he's got Diva. I've never tried it before. It was updated 14 days ago, so that's a good sign. Nope. He's got Viewer.js also. I guess that's for documents. So yeah, you can do quite a bit with just what's available. And this has all evolved over the past 2 years. I can't remember exactly when they released Omeka S, but it was quite messy in the beginning. And now it's getting, with version 3 of Omeka and all of Daniel's work on these modules, it's getting pretty organized and standardized. So I think with that, that's all I kind of really wanted to say, is just establish the basic kind of use case for what you can do with Omeka. And I can answer more questions at the end.
Great, thank you, Ben. That was a really great way to start this. Much appreciated. Okay, so next up, we have Martim.
I'll stop sharing.
And you should be able to just share your screen too.
Actually, sorry, I didn't let you know, but Dave will be presenting with me.
Ah, okay, great.
Splitting the presentation, so he'll be sharing the screen now.
Perfect.
Thanks, Ben, for your presentation. And actually, you mentioned a lot of stuff that I was going to. That leaves me more time to bring a bit of context to our presentation. So, yeah, I'm speaking on behalf of Imagine Rio here, and more specifically, the project Situated Views of Rio. Imagine Rio is, can you go to the next one, Dave, please? Yeah. Is a platform started by the Rice University School of Humanities Research Center and also the Center for Research Computing. And it's a digital atlas of Rio, a searchable one. It started in 2014, more or less, and basically gathers geographical information on Rio across the years. So they digitize and vectorize all the cartography they could find for the city. And you have this timeline above where you can pick a year, and it will render a map of Rio in that year, including polygons for buildings that are known and some photographs as well. So this is pretty much what Imagine Rio is. IMS is where I actually work at. We are a cultural, non-profit cultural institution based in Brazil, in 3 cities here. And we have collections spanning 5 areas: so music, iconography, literature, photography, and contemporary photography. And one of the gems of our collection is this large collection of 19th and early 20th century photography in Brazil, which includes glass plates, balloon prints, stereoscopic pairs, and whatnot. And back around the same time, in 2014-15, we started experimenting with, it's fine. Experimenting with cartography and discovery and representation of our collections in cartographic platforms and interfaces. And we became aware of Imagine Rio around the same time. And we started drafting a collaboration together. And we had a chance to make a presentation to the Getty Foundation and to write a proposal for their Digital Art History Grant. So this proposal was approved in late 2018. And the project is called Situated Views of Rio de Janeiro. And it, among other things, so next slide, please. We proposed these goals. Of course, they are a bit loose, so some things have changed, but next one. Most importantly, of these goals, 2 were very specific about IIIF. So Imagine Rio would need to be able to consume IIIF manifests and display IIIF images, and everything that we publish should also be IIIF compliant. So the goal is to geolocate 4,000 photographs of IMS's collection and ingest them into the cartographic geographic database of Imagine Real. To do that, so at the beginning, Imagine Real was heavily map-based, centered, and once this project started, photographs took a larger importance in the infrastructure of the platform, and we needed an image repository to deal with that. And also it needed to be IIIF compliant based on the Getty's specifications and requirements for giving us the grant. So initially we were planning on writing a plugin for DSpace to handle the IIIF compliance, but that proved not to be worth it. So time after time, DSpace deceived us in many different cases, and we turned ourselves to Omeka, which was just published and already had the modules that Ben mentioned, published by Daniel. So what we did was to spend part of our budget to fund the upgrade of his modules to support version 3 of IIIF. So basically, IIIF server and image server were brought up to date with v3. And we also used this clean URL module he wrote, which allows us to have the manifest with our own IMS identifiers. So that's pretty useful too. So I'm gonna quote Daniel's take on this project as we asked him to write a few words. So apparently his development for Omeka started in 2015 for Omeka Classic for a French engineering school. So it was a module that contained everything in it. So the image server, the manifest creation, the universal viewer, everything. And the building. Yeah, so everything was there together because universal viewer was not a simple viewer and it doesn't work with a simple URL. So it requires IIIF data. So that's why everything was bundled together. And so he just ported that to Omeka, and then the version 3, he actually separated things. And the clean URL started in 2012 for another engineering because it really makes no sense to expose Omeka's internal IDs. So it's much cleaner to use your own institution's IDs. So after a few months of developing, we now have the final repository. Dave, can you skip this? This is the front page, and we're actually using Omeka as a headless CMS. So we're just using it to store data, and the pages for Imagine Real are built with Next, and this is what Dave will cover next. But just so you can see in the next slide, we have an item page in Omeka. You can see the media page here, and just changing the URL, putting the IIIF and the manifest, you're able to open it in Mirador and other viewers. So that's how things go. And you can see here, sorry, in the manifest, in the previous one, sorry, Dave. You can see we're also linking in the manifest, we're linking back to Omeka's API page of that same item, and that's what Dave uses to build the static pages. So next. Item sets are also work with the IIIF server. So every item set that you create in Omeka gets a collection manifest. And we have this all collection, which includes all of our items, of course, to have a way to gather and pull all the items in a IIIF fashion. So you can And of course, we also make these separations on type of material. That's for Imagine Real as well. But in the next slide, Dave will take over and you'll see more or less what the architecture looks like.
Thanks, Martim. I'm David Heyman. Can everyone hear me? Am I still on mute?
No, we can hear you.
Yes, we can.
Excellent, excellent. I'm David Heyman, technical lead on Imagine Rio, and I'm from Axis Maps. I just wanted to kind of show you where Omeka fits into kind of the whole architecture of this larger project. Because Imagine Rio brings together geographic data and maps, Omeka is kind of the cornerstone of the image side of the project. So this is our overall infrastructure diagram. From left to right, it goes from private to public. And then it's divided into two sections, the blue representing images and the yellow representing geographic data. So Omeka represents kind of everything you see here in this top left corner. So it is our private image repository. So it's the database that stores the images in metadata. There's the IIIF server and the image server. Those are both Omeka modules. The IIIF manifests, which is produced by the IIIF server, and then also the Omeka REST API, which serves all of the metadata that doesn't fit into the IIIF manifest. And all of these come together and get put into this III Rio, which is our own API. This is our own database. So we consume the manifest, consume the data from the REST API, and then put it into this Postgres database, which we can then connect to a REST API for much faster searching and delivery. So we have this institutional layer where the researchers feed in their images to Omeka S, and then it goes through all of these processes. But at the end of that, we have a nice, fast, tailored database that's just suited for our front end. And our geographic data goes through a similar process. There's the kind of institutional database, and then there's our GeoRio processor, which caches and stores the images. But that's for another talk. And this is the end result. This is the V3 interface of Imagine Rio. Like Martim was saying, we had the version 1, which was the proof of concept. Version 2 refined the user interface. And then version 3 is all about images. We want these images that come from Omeka to share equal space with the map. We want to create an exploration environment where you can be searching images and you can see them in their spatial context side by side, and create an interface where that type of exploration is possible. And in order to do this, we're taking a headless and static approach using Next.js, which is a React framework. It does server-side rendering and static page rendering, but we're mostly using static pages for this. But just to go over these two terms again, headless means we're just using Omeka as a backend solution. It's just where the researchers put their data, and it's just where we consume that information from. We don't expect anyone on the public side to use our Omeka library. And then static generation means that we're pre-rendering all of the pages. When a user visits the Imagine Rio site, it doesn't talk to the Omeka database. Instead, it's just retrieving static HTML and JavaScript that rendered, say, the night before or a week ago. And the reason we decided to do this is, one, it's easier to maintain. Static sites can't break. The only thing they can do is not update. So there's always going to be a working version of this site. And for a DH project, I think that's really important. It's also cheaper to host because it means that we don't have to be putting all of this CPU and all of this power into our Omeka server. We can just do enough to generate the pages, and then the rest can go on something cheap like S3. For us, this was a big one. It's easier to develop and integrate with our other systems. Because the map's going to be built in React, being able to share components between our Omeka pages and the overall interface was really important to us. And then finally, the end result is much faster. Because when you load a site, you're just getting the data you need, just getting that HTML and JavaScript. It comes through really, really fast, and you can browse the pages very quick. So here's just a quick demo of the site that exists so far. First is our homepage, directing people either to the map or the iconography. On the iconography page, we have our collections divided into 4: views, maps, plans, and aerials. And you can see our views have 1,700, nearly 1,800 items. And here's what this views page looks like. And I mean, this is the really great thing about static site generation. I have 1,800 items on the page, and I can just fly through them. They're all there. It loads instantly, and I can just scroll around with everything right there. Doesn't have to call the server. There's no pagination. It's all just right there on the client side with all of these images. And then when we actually get to the collection pages, this is what's really nice. And this is what we were able to do by running Omeka headless. First, we have this Mirador viewer with that nice image tiling from the IIIF image server. And then we have the Imagine Rio map. So we have this map actually georeferenced, and this base map is on a temporally accurate base map. So this is from 1904 to 1906. So the streets that we're seeing, those actually existed in Rio at that time. So we have the zoomed in view, and then we can also view this in its geographic context, in its temporal context. And then finally, we have a lot of these views. So once again, we have the Mirador viewer, the description, and for a view, something that isn't a map or a plan, we have the view cone, which represents the point of the map, and then what can be seen inside of it, the metadata, and then finally the 3D view with snapshot. And we talked briefly the other uses of IIIF, and that's snapshot, and we've just seen a small part of it, but there's more to that interface. And that is it. Thank you all very much for your time.
Yeah, just to let everyone know that in our GitHub, we have a Docker image with Omeka and all the modules we're using. So if you just want to grab that and try some stuff out with your guests. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And feel free to shoot us an email also. I'll be sharing the presentation link in the IIIF channels.
Great, thank you both. That was really wonderful. Does anyone have any quick questions?
I have one technical question. For the image tiling, I guess it just depends on the resolution of your images, but I found the image tiling relatively slow. So can you comment on like either the maximum resolution of your images or what kind of specs you have behind Omeka in order to deliver smooth image tiling?
Yeah. So Daniel actually updated the engine he uses for tiling quite recently. So it used to be Image Magic, and it was really rather slow. Now it's using VIPs. So it's much faster. It cut down from a 12-hour job to 1 hour to tile, I don't know, a couple hundred images. So yeah, it's much improved. Our images are in the 9,000 pixel wide ballpark. So we're using a phase 1 IQ something. And so yeah, that's the size of our files more or less. They're storing in Ocean and Omeka put them from there.
Wow, that's amazing. I really got to try out this. I didn't realize the image processor had switched.
Yeah, it's quite recent.
And can you just clarify, are you doing pre-tiled images or dynamic? Dynamic, okay. Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome.
And it's running on a pretty lightweight server. I think it's 2 gigs of RAM, 1 CPU. It's whatever's on DigitalOcean for $20 a month. So really light, running in a Docker container. So it's able to handle it. We did have to put in some caching on the web server. So that does improve performance.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, great. So I thank you both. That was really wonderful to see. Next up, we have the folks at Digirati. I believe Matt might be
Hi there.
presenting. Oh, there you are. Hello.
Yeah. Sorry, my label isn't my name, but
Okay, I know. I was going through the list. I was like, oh, huh.
but yeah, I can just share my screen if that's okay.
Yep, go for it.
So I'll share my desktop so I can flick between a PowerPoint presentation and a web browser. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Madoc. So hopefully you can see my PowerPoint presentation, which is about Madoc, which is our crowdsourcing platform. Madoc's actually, got quite a long kind of genesis. So I'm going to give a kind of few slides just talking about the background to it, and then talk about what we're doing at the moment, which is a kind of work in progress. So when I come to do a demo, it's a demo of a work in progress rather than a finished product, but hopefully it will be of interest. So, I mean, the background to this is we were in late 2016, early 2017, we began 3 projects more or less concurrently, which were the crowdsourcing platform for Wales, which was a project through the National Library of Wales, Science in the Making, which is a project for the Royal Society in London, and the Indigenous Digital Archive, which is a project for the Museum of Indian Arts and Culture in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And they all had some very similar requirements. They all needed to do IIIF-based document delivery of images and manifests. They had to have a search and browse environment where you could discover the things that had been added to the environment. But they all had an element of user contribution, which was done in slightly different ways, but they either had the requirement to tag within text or tag images, like photographs and maps and so on, do transcription and translation, or add commentary. And it made sense, we thought, to do them all on the back of the same platform. So what we built, which we didn't call Madoc at the time, although that name kind of emerged part of the way through the process, was we built something that used Omeka S for the CMS, and it also used Omeka S to store a lot of the data. So we modeled a lot of the data that we stored as Omeka items, and we used Omeka's APIs to deliver that content. But we didn't use Omeka for all of the search functionality. So for IDA and Royal Society, there's an Elasticsearch index, which is hooked up to the front end, but the search itself isn't driven by Omeka's internal search. And then we built a load of Omeka S plugins, and I'll show you some of those in a second. But they included things like user management, which was to give people the ability to register with Omeka, for themselves. So not users that have been pre-created by an administrator, but self-register via OpenAuth or Shibboleth. The crowdsourcing tools themselves to do annotation and transcription and so on. Integration with IIIF, which we didn't use any internal IIIF hosting within Omeka or use the modules that have been mentioned already. We used a mixture of either hosting by the client. So, for example, the National Library of Wales had their own IIIF servers, so we were using their IIIF content, or using Digirati's Digital Library Cloud Service to do the IIIF hosting. So the integration in Omeka was to present the IIIF, but not to deliver the images from within Omeka. We added internationalization features to do translation. That was particularly important to the National Library of Wales, who have to display everything in Welsh and in English. So that was successful. All 3 projects completed and were fine. But we didn't open source the work we'd done at that point. And there were a few reasons for that. One was the code was actually somewhat bespoke for each of the 3 projects. So although there was a lot of shared plugins and a lot of shared components, there wasn't really one platform in use across the 3. The things that we called capture models, that was the sort of task definitions that described the crowdsourcing tasks that you had to carry out. They were hard to administer, the format was complex, and it was kind of shoehorned into the W3C web annotation model in a way that made it quite hard for someone who didn't have either a lot of experience or some custom tooling to edit. And extension and customization of the platform was quite hard. So it wasn't really ready to take that to market as a fully open source, turnkey, shovel-ready project. So we went into a second phase, call this maybe phase 1, towards the end of 2019, where we did some incremental updates. We consolidated the code base from the 3 projects that had been done to date. We open sourced it, but we retained the existing Omeka S-based capture model and the use of the web annotation data model for storing the annotations and content. It was fully functional. The code's out there, it's open source, it can be used, but administration and customization of that is still quite difficult. So we went into a new phase, but before we did that, I will show you the previous projects. So hopefully you can see my web browser. So Indigenous Digital Archive, it's using Omeka S. It has its own kind of skin. It lets you view archival documents from the US National Archives by, for example, by Indian School, which is the schools these documents are associated with. You can view the documents. They have machine-generated tags on all of the images that are clickable, and you can search through these. And you can add to these with a kind of, I can select something and type in a term and start adding data about an organization and tag it in the image. Science in the Making was more kind of curated content from the Royal Society's archive, but it also has a crowdsourced element. So if I'm looking at something in here, and this has timelines, it has graphs, so I can look at the graph of all the different objects via Huxley's role as a referee, and I can view a document, and this is all IIIF, and I can transcribe this document or I can tag it. So I'm not going to do a tag here, but if I start typing in science, it's going to search Library of Congress subject headings, and I can choose the topic that I want to tag it with, add the keyword, and it will tag the document. So there's a kind of crowdsourcing element, and this is all Omeka based. So we can see we've got a lot of modules we wrote for Omeka S, most of which I think were not fully open source, but there is Google Analytics, annotation servers, IIIF integration, webhooks, public user registration, autocomplete services, and so on. So that was the kind of phase 0 to phase 1 project. So if I go back to my presentation, we picked up new clients to work with the platform who had a much more extensive set of requirements. So that was University of Ghent, School of Oriental and African Studies, the Staatsbibliothek in Berlin, Indigenous Digital Archive for a second phase, and so on. And the things we needed to do for this was provide more flexible workflows, more granular permissions and additional user roles. Something that we didn't do well in the first phase was have a kind of review and approval workflow for newly created content. We didn't have versioning of content, so you couldn't get back to earlier versions of something that a user had done. We needed to provide much more powerful administration, make it much more flexible out of the box, so it didn't need bespoke code written. It could be actually fully managed by the end user. And we added support for OCR correction. So on a technical basis, this is not CMS, Omeka CMS in quite as deeply integrated a way. It's a little bit more like the kind of Imagine Rio stack. We're using Omeka S to provide part of the functionality, but then there's a whole bunch of additional sidecar services or microservices associated with it. So search is external, it's Postgres. We have a tasks API, a kind of service that manages the flow of content through tasks in the workflow. We have services to do data transformation from MET6ML or from OCR formats, integration with local file storage. So the APIs that the service provides can be used to store data from external API calls. It has a kind of common API bus, so we can write additional services, but also people integrating it into their own workflow can write their own API integrations, because it provides a kind of common API across all these services. It has far fewer Omeka S plugins, but it still has some. It doesn't use the web annotation data model as an internal format, but it does use it on output, and it can potentially be run headless with a bespoke front end. And we've got a project on the go now to write that headless front end for a particular project that has some special requirements about the UI. There's currently a fully featured alpha, so I'm rushing through this to get to a quick demo, which is fully featured vis-a-vis all the client requirements. So all of the things that were in the requirements for all these different projects, it can do all of them, but the UX isn't great. It's functional, but it lacks polish. It's not that user-friendly. We've had really useful feedback from the client, the various clients, about what we need to do. We're in the process of that at the moment. So we're doing a big kind of UX pass, a lot of theming, changing to the UI, changes to the user workflows, improving the kind of process through which administrators can set up projects. So there'll be more kind of built-in wizards / templates for starting a project up from scratch. And we're going to aim to soft launch this as a kind of beta in March. So we're about 6 weeks away, 5 to 6 weeks away from that, which is just all kind of UI and UX improvements. So with that said, I think I've got a few minutes left to do a very quick demo. So this is the admin UI for Madoc. So there, you can manage content, so we can manage the IIIF collections that have been imported in here. These are all collections taken from the Welcome collection. I can import new collections via the Add New Collection button, and it will import them from anywhere. They don't have to be hosted within Omeka or on any service that Digirati manage. It's entirely kind of compliant with anyone's IIIF content. I can add individual manifests. And then we have this kind of two-part model of there's a kind of site, but a site can have many projects within it, so it's kind of multi-tenant in that sense. So sites have their own configuration, which I'm not going to go into right now because I'll cover that in a second on projects. But then for projects, I've got 3 here, but if I go to one of these projects, I can do various things about its description. I can add content to the project by adding things from existing IIIF collections or manifests. So this is content that's going to be provided through that project for crowdsourcing. I can configure the site so I can allow users to navigate by manifest or by canvas. I can randomly assign content to new crowdsourcing users when they arrive. They'll just get given content to pick up. I can assign what the review process looks like, what happens when it gets reviewed, and so on. There's a lot of config here, all provided through a config UI. But then I can define the model for what gets captured. So I can define the fields in this model. So this collection is just a collection of horse-related material. So I have a model for horses, and it's got 2 fields that are description and image. And I could add a new field. So maybe I'm going to add a checkbox, and I'm going to put something like in profile. So with the idea being that you take this if the image of the horse is in profile rather than front on. I can add a description, and I can add a label like check this if the horse is side on. So I can edit my model that the user will capture. I can also create nested models so that the users can go through this process in a kind of logical way. I can preview the structure of this model that's going to be provided. And so this is all kind of in the back end for my administration. So it doesn't require any complex coding to define new models for data capture. It's all administrable through a kind of fairly user-friendly UI. This UI is being revised at the moment as part of our UX pass. So this is a completely skeleton site here, just with some demo content thrown in, done earlier today. It has no theming and no custom UX. But I can browse by project. And on here, I have 3 projects, or by collection. So I can just go and see the IIIF content that's been put in here. And I can go in and look at the IIIF resource. I can open this manifest in Mirador. It's embedding Mirador 3. Or I can search the content. So if I search for something like equine it will find all of the canvases here that have the term equine in them. It has some faceting, which I'll demonstrate in a second. So if I was searching for something like training, it finds a number of manifests, and then I've got some facets on the left here where I can filter by, for example, author to just things written by Edward Anderson, or I can filter to dates, so maybe things from 1882. All of this is generated dynamically from the metadata on the way in, so you don't have to know what's in the IIIF manifests. It will just use that to generate the facets. But we can manage it, so I can go in to my project. I'll go back to admin. I can change the search indexing. And so, for example, maybe I find title not a very useful facet field, so I can just remove it. And what's shown on the right here is all of the metadata fields found in all of the collections in that project, so I can change these. If I go in via a project, so this is the project we saw a few minutes ago where I had this horse data capture model. This is one of those cautions of a live demo. Something's timing out because it's running on a slow server. So I go to project, and maybe I'm interested in looking at these manifests, and perhaps I'll grab one of these. This is an Edward Muybridge image from the Welcome collection, and I've got this option to contribute, and that model that I just defined earlier for tagging horses, I can define a region in the image, and then I can check it that there's a horse in the image, and I can submit this, for example. This is a very simple model, obviously, but there's this kind of process. And then finally, the last thing I'll show you before I stop, because I'm running a bit long, is there is a review workflow. So because I'm logged in as administrator, I can review people's contributions. So if I find some earlier one that's been looked at before, I can see this one has been completed, but I might want to look at one that hasn't. So I can review this contribution that a user's made. I can edit the submission. I can reject it. I can request changes. So if I request changes, I can hit request, and that will be returned back to the contributor, and I can see it in this UI for them to make revisions based on what I asked them to do. When the contribution's been accepted and completed to review, it's indexed into the search index, and then that browse and search interface will also search that content. So I annotated some things earlier with straw hat, and I can find this object that has been annotated by me. The annotation's below here, because it's just this has no theming or skinning done on this UI, and I can bring up other annotations if they're there. I think that's it for me. I'm happy to take questions. As I said, it's very bare bones in terms of its UI. That's the work that's going on at the moment, but all of the kind of administration and workflow features are fully complete. So it's a case of the polish on both the admin UI and the user-facing crowdsourcing process to be done. Thank you.
So any questions from anyone? Okay, great. Thank you, Matt. That was really wonderful to see, and we really appreciate you joining us and taking the time to present. I just want to thank everyone who presented and everyone who attended for joining us once again. And thanks especially to those of you who are new to the calls. If you are interested, I'm going to put the link to the IIIF newsletter in the chat once again. And I'm also putting a link to the IIIF community calendar where you can see all the different calls that we have. So if you're interested in joining a future community call, these calls happen every 2 weeks, or a call for one of the different community groups, they're all linked right on there. And you can grab the Zoom URL and put it on your calendar. All right, great. So thanks everyone again, and hopefully we will see you all in 2 weeks.
Cheers all.
Bye, thanks.